Hey guys, how you going? So today on Big House Sport, we are back for the World Rugby Review. We do this every single week. Normally it's on a Monday, but I've decided to change it to Tuesdays because this is actually when the official World Rugby rankings get updated. And I thought that although I can use a predictor website that basically does give you exactly what you're looking for, I still want to go on when the official World Rugby rankings get updated. So we've got a lot to talk about this week because it basically is the last week of rugby for this. Well, it is the last week of rugby for this year, unless anything does seem to miraculously change. We've obviously seen the Autumn Nations Cup just finish up with an absolute banger of a game between England and France, wowie mama. They had a good game. Yes, they damn well did. And obviously the Australia versus Argentina game that finished up the Tri Nations for 2020. So let's get into talking about some rugby that we saw this week. In order of how the games went, we had Australia and Argentina. Oh yeah, oh my goodness, oh gee whiz. 16-16, another damn well draw. The last time these two teams played 2 weeks ago was a 15-15 draw. And this time it's a 16-16 draw. And in this game, it was basically similar, but just obviously the extra 1 point each team and the same finish, Reece Hodge. Yeah, no, we'll get into that one, don't you worry. Then we had the Fijians. Hey, welcome back, son. Welcome back. Georgia played Fiji, and Fiji won that game 38-24. A bit of a mixed game. I don't really think we should read too much into this game, but there are still some points that we'll talk about because the way the Fijians played was quite interesting. Next up, we had the Irish going up against Scotland. Ireland and Scotland for third place, and the Irish won 31-16. The Irish obviously bounced back after a pretty poor first 3 games of the tournament and looked a lot better in this game. Scotland, on the other hand, didn't look too great, but this isn't exactly their first string team. We'll get into that. Wales took on Italy, and Wales won 38-18. Very close game up until half-time, but obviously the Welsh in the end, they powered home to win that one and win it quite well. But I have been saying for a decent amount of time now that Italy aren't as bad as you would think, and although they're not really going to take down too many of the big dogs, they still are definitely the primo team of underneath those big dog section. And then finally, we had the English and the French game, which finished 22-19. Now, this was a very interesting game. The English obviously were heavy favourites for this. They won, 22-19. The English were very heavy favourites for this game. And I was trying to say, I think that this is a lot more even of a game, despite the fact that obviously the French had less than 100 caps and the English had over 800, 900 caps in the team. So, the differences was quite astonishing. The French team was very young, like a third string French team. And obviously, they would have loved to have made the final, but this tournament wasn't really a tournament that you needed to be focusing on actually winning it all. It was more about laying those foundations that I've been saying for weeks now, laying those foundations for that 2023 World Cup in 3 years' time, especially for the French, who are the home team, are a young team, and definitely have improved from their previous 10 years. Ever since that 2011 World Cup, they've definitely been downhill. But the last couple of years, we've been seeing them rocket up. And this game specifically showed just what they're made of. But we'll get into the Autumn Nations Cup games in just a second. Let's first move into the Australia versus Argentina completion of the Tri Nations. Now, that was a 16-16 draw, as I did say. Look, it was another game the Wallabies should have won. There was another game the Wallabies should have won, but obviously they didn't. I think that people are going to look at this rugby season and see the results from Australia and not understand that they actually did improve and they're definitely on the up compared to what we've previously seen. I think they're going to look at the fact that there was 3 draws, 2 losses and 1 win as a massive failure, and I just don't think so. I don't think Australia's intention really was to go out and win this Tri Nations, when in reality, you look at the games that were played and they should have won it. It was down to Reece Hodge missing his kicks, basically. I know people are going to be like, it's a team game. Not in the 78th minute when you're taking the clutch kick. It's not a team game when you're, with 2 minutes to go or 1 minute to go, you have the kick on your foot, your boot, and you miss it 3 times in a rugby season to make sure of a draw when you would have won the game for the team. You would have won the game for the team. So yes, it is a team game up until that point, but then when the team gets you to the point where it's a draw with a minute or 2 to go and you're taking that penalty from whether it's left, right, buddy, middle, good night, who cares where it is? Maybe 55 metres out in Wellington you can kind of understand to the left where it's a bit windy, but Reece Hodge, he's a massive reason why Australia didn't win the Tri Nations. Now, I'm not saying Reece Hodge is a bad player. But you go and have a look at the rugby season for the Wallabies, and we'll look specifically at the Tri-Nations. Forget the Bledisloe for the time being. We'll forget that Wellington game because, like I just said, they should have won it. This really was the Wallabies losing it. New Zealand weren't great this tournament. Argentina weren't actually that great. I know that a lot of people are talking about them being, well, they'd be happy with what they had, but in the same sense, not really. But I guess the results show a happiness, but not really. So in regards to Australia specifically, they lost that first game to New Zealand by a long way, and that obviously practically lost it for them. That was the one that really put it out of reach. The second one, alongside the New Zealand and Argentina game, but mainly that first game was what put it out of reach for the Wallabies. The second game, they won. Okay, so they won that one, and that started to make it more believable. The third game, they played Argentina. They drew. Reece Hodge obviously missed the kick. If he gets that kick, they go into the fourth game, the final game, with the chance to win if they win. If they win it, they win the Tri-Nations. But he misses that kick. And then New Zealand go and win it against Argentina in that the game in between the 2 weeks. So then when we get to the fourth game, obviously he misses the kick again. So you could realistically change the rugby season for Australia from 3 draws, 2 losses, 1 win, 4 wins and 2 losses. It's a bit of a different story, but I'm looking at that. They're looking at the missed kick, and obviously to get to that point and still be a draw at that point, you shouldn't be happy with that. But this is a young, rebuilding Australian team. They're coming out of a stage that is not good. They're coming out of a stage that has been a terrible organisation for 20 years, and we're rebuilding the organisation, let alone the actual team. So the fact of the matter is that if they had a kicker, if they had someone who could have at least gotten 2 of those kicks out of 3, not Owen Farrell. Owen Farrell, we'll talk about you in a second, but, you get a kicker. Australia go from 3 draws, 2 losses, and 1 win to 4 wins, 2 losses, which is much better, a much better outlook. Argentina, on the other hand, they weren't necessarily great this tournament. They had their great game against the All Blacks in that first game and won 25-15, but it wasn't that great. Outside of that, the second game against the first game against the Australians, they were okay, but Australia were the better team, but just didn't win it in the end, and the defense is good. Don't get me wrong, Argentina's defense is fantastic. Argentina's defense is doing really well, but their attack is horrific. Like, it's horrible. Their attack is on par with Georgia at this stage. At this rate, Argentina's attack is just poor. They don't have anything. They don't throw the ball around. They don't do anything with the ball. They don't do anything. So it's like, they didn't score a try against Australia the first game. They didn't score a try against... Did they even score a try in that game against New Zealand in the third game? They obviously scored 1 or 2 against them in the first game, but they only scored 1 or 2 tries throughout the entire tournament. And one of them was obviously that counter-attack that was on the previous game this weekend. So, look, Argentina, obviously you'd still be happy with the fact that they got some results from this tournament, but in the same sense, I think if you look more at what they're doing right now, it's not actually that great, and I think that if it was on a dry track that wasn't pouring down rain the entire time, I think the Wallabies probably would have won that and won it well. But the pouring down torrential conditions, nearly even hail at one point, was just so favourable to a defensive outfit, and Argentina were just able to lock them down. And, I think they probably feel like they're unlucky not to win, but I don't think so. I think the Wallabies absolutely dominated that game, but unfortunately just didn't have the attack in wet conditions, weren't able to hold the ball. And I just think that the preparation that would have gone into that game would have been thrown out the window. So there would have been basically no preparation. So, look, overall, in regards to the Tri-Nations, I think we're going to do a grading system next week for all teams across all different countries for this year, 2020. I think we'll do a grade of what I think all the teams mustered up. I don't think I'll give Argentina as high a grade as you probably think. I think Australia will get probably a mid-ranger and New Zealand will probably get a mid-ranger, but I think you've got to look more into the actual games themselves rather than the results here, because there's a couple of results here that really, if you have a kicker that can actually damn well kick the penalty and not choke it up, Australia go from a massive, massive, under-impressing, disappointing rugby season to a very impressive return to form under Dave Rennie. But in saying all that, obviously still disappointing in regards to the results. But also something to think about. Okay, let's move into the Autumn Nations Cup games. First up, let's go into the Georgia-Fiji game, which was 38-24. Obviously, Fiji won that game quite convincingly. They bounced back after obviously having no preparation, no training, no game for over a year and a half. This was just an absolute toss-around effort. We all know that Fiji is an uncoachable team. They're always going to play the same way, whether you play 2 games in a row or 3 years apart. They're always going to play the same way. So you can only really train them in regards to and coach them in regards to their fitness or their, I guess, defense, but really not really. I think that Fiji is just so, they know what they're going to do. They don't know what they're going to do, actually. They don't know what they're going to do. That's the beauty of Fiji in rugby. So they came out and they scored 38 points here. They dominated the first 10 minutes. Georgia, obviously, were able to still score a few tries. I do think that's down to lack of preparation, and I do think that's down to Fiji just being exhausted or just not being prepared for this game whatsoever. I think that this is a very unrealistic scoreline for a game of what these two teams would do on a normal preparation basis. Georgia obviously weren't great this tournament at all. They lost the first game 40-0 to England. I think the second game they lost 18-0 to Wales, but they weren't too bad. But Wales are just that bad, and they still won 18-0. And that they won 18-0 with a try after the siren too, after the red marker. And then obviously the third game, 23-10 with Ireland, which they were somewhat impressive, but Ireland just weren't great. So for me, Georgia, they're smack bang where they are. By the way, guys, there's no movement in the rankings today. There's absolutely no movement in the rankings this week. Everyone's staying the same. Scotland and Ireland could have dropped out of the top 5, top 6 into 7th, but if Scotland had a 1, but they didn't, obviously. And yeah, no one really changed a significant amount. The biggest movement of the week was plus 0.72 for Argentina. They moved up to 80.31, just behind Scotland, to 80.82. So that was the biggest movement. But outside of that, there's no real changes here. So I think that Georgia, they're very fair there. I think that probably they're more so 13th rather than 12th, and I think that Italy should be 12th rather than 13th. But I say this every single week, so it doesn't really matter. Outside of that, yeah, there's nothing else that I really think that should change around. I think maybe at this point, no, we'll get to France in a second. But yeah, that's the Georgia and Fiji game. I think the Fiji going into that 2023 World Cup will actually look really good. I think this is a big shock. I think the Fiji, you look at them in 3 years' time, their preparation from now until then, they will be a team to be reckoned with. I don't think they're going to be a top 4 team, but they could be a 5 or 6. I don't think they're going to be a top 4 team odds-wise, but I think they'll be a 5 or 6. I really think this team will be a semi-final contender. Final contender, no, but semi-final, they could honestly be pushing to make it there. They just obviously need to, I don't know. I don't even know what they need to do. They're always going to do the same thing. So there's no real kind of, you need to do this, because they're not going to do it. They're just going to do what they damn well want to do. So that's what's going to be interesting with Fiji. And yeah, I think that's everything we need to know. But very good win there. Very good win, considering they haven't played in over a year and a half. Next game was obviously the Ireland and Scotland game. Now, Ireland won 31-16. I think that Ireland really bounced back in this game. They were much more impressive than previously. I think going forward, they still have a lot of problems. They still have a lot of things to work on. They're still quite bland rugby. It's still very bland. There's nothing really to get excited about with this team at the moment. They obviously have completely regressed from their 2018 standing point, and they need to figure out how to do a turnaround in the next 3 years to be competitive, especially considering it's in the Northern Hemisphere. Teams in the Northern Hemisphere, this is your chance to win. We've obviously seen South Africa win 3 times, New Zealand win 3 times, Australia win 2 times. That's all Southern Hemisphere teams. Only other one World Cup that was won was England in 2003 in Australia. So, they need to stand up and realise that this World Cup is going to be in the Northern Hemisphere. So make sure a Northern Hemisphere team wins it right now, because it's getting to the point of ridiculous that it's just continuously the Southern Hemisphere teams that continually win. And I think that's based on the positive attacking game style rather than the defensive-minded grind. And I think that's what we see a lot of the time with your Ireland, with your Wales, with your England. I think Ireland were good back when they were really attacking a lot more. But, Northern Hemisphere rugby is a lot more grind and physical, and it's just not as exciting. It's not as exciting. So I know people will sit there and they're like, oh, yeah, it's defensive grind. I like low-scoring grinds. I like grinds, but I also don't want to see, 13-10 and only penalties. I want to see some attacking movement. I want to see some attacking flair, and really with these games. Like, for example, that Wales-Ireland game to start off this tournament was an absolute peak of what Northern Hemisphere rugby is like right now. So, except for France. We'll give France, though. France are a very nice, creative flair attacking team. So, France are the only team that I can really appreciate their rugby style at the moment in the Northern Hemisphere. But obviously Northern Hemisphere people will be like you're English and you're Irish. Will be like, oh buddy, all right, Mr. Southern Hemisphere, all right, Mr. Wallabies fan, you relax. Your team's shit. Well, yeah, my team is shit. All right, it's been shit for 20 years, but I'm not. I'm also telling you a fact about the fact that there's only been one Northern Hemisphere team that has ever won a World Cup. So yeah, I think Scotland obviously are improving. I don't think they put out we won't talk too much about them because they haven't put out too much of a first grade squad in this tournament. I think Six Nations, we're going to see a lot more about what these teams have to provide. I think Six Nations in 2 months' time, which we will be streaming, by the way, guys. We obviously stream all the time. But that Scotland team will be a lot better in probably 2 years' time, I think. I think they're tracking towards a 2 years progress at this point. Yeah, I think that they'll probably be, they'll be above Wales. They'll be above Wales for the time being anyway. I'm definitely a lot more excited. I'm probably the second most excited about Scotland coming out of this tournament right now. I think that France, obviously, the number one, and Scotland, number two. And I even think Italy are looking pretty decent, but they're not anywhere near decent enough to take down the big dogs. But yeah, I think that you'd be happy if you're an Irish fan after this performance. They came out, they won it. Easy days. Next up, Wales, Italy. Nothing really too much to talk about here. Italy made it really close. I think this game was a lot closer than the scoreline reflects. I think that if you're a Welsh fan, you'd be happy with the win, but you'd also be disappointed that it took so long for the Welsh to come out of their barriers. The Italians, obviously, they're just happy to be here at this point. I think that they are showing a lot more attacking rugby. I think they're showing a lot more flair to their game, but there's still a long way to go for them. They're still in their very early stages before they become a successful team. They need a lot more assistance on and off the field to become a big-time regular. So I think Italy, obviously, like I said, are a better team than Georgia and definitely better than Tonga, but we all know the World Rugby rankings, not exactly great. Because of the amount of games teams play against non-competitive teams, whilst other teams are playing the competitive teams. Wales, on the other hand, obviously, they probably, and I'm not going to lie to you, you go and have a look at the rankings, they would have dropped out of the top 10. They would have dropped out of the top 10. I think if Fiji had been playing in this tournament and didn't have 3 games where they had to lose 28-0, which was huge, obviously, for their rankings, I think they would have jumped Wales. I think they would have beat Scotland. I think they would have beat, who was the other team? Italy. And they would have given France a good crack because they have very similar outfits, the way those two teams play. I think that the way Fiji play would honestly nearly have won 3 games. But I do think that France would have won it because they're a structural improved version of your Fiji. They're your equivalent in regards to play styles and game styles in Northern and Southern Hemisphere. So I think that, yeah, Fiji are a lot more expansive and expressive. And I think France are a lot more structured, but they still play a similar style with your attacking flair, with your offloads, with your, really fast-paced movement. Anyway, getting back to what I was saying, Fiji probably would have jumped Wales. It probably would have jumped Wales, and I think if Japan definitely. If Japan were playing in some games this off-season and we didn't have the pandemic, Japan would have jumped Wales no matter what. Fiji is a little bit debatable, but Japan would have no matter what. So Wales should be in 10th right now. Really, if I'm going to tell you right now what I think Wales should be 11th. I think Fiji should be above Wales, and I think Japan should be above Wales. Yeah, I know that's a big thing to say for the Welsh, but you're not great right now. You're not great. Prove me wrong. Prove me wrong when it comes to Six Nations in 2 months. I look forward to seeing it because Wales are a very proud, passionate rugby country, and prove me wrong, please. Because from what I saw in this tournament, it was not great at all. Bland, boring, and just shithouse. So I'd really like to see the Welsh improve going forward and show me something in that Six Nations, and not against Italy. I want to see it against a good team, not against Italy. You won 38-18, you still gave up 18 points to the Italians, and it was very close until the second half started. So, that's great that you won, but a lot of improvement. You're not the same team anymore. A lot of improvement needed. Next game we'll get onto is obviously the final game. Now, this was an awesome game to watch. If you weren't watching the stream, we were having a cracker time at 4:35 a.m. my time. But for you guys, obviously, it was a really good time over there in Europe. But England beat France 22-19. Now, I do think France were the team that comes out of this looking the better. I think that France were the better team in general. I think that Owen Farrell is an idiot. He's an idiot. Obviously, in regards to his gameplay, no. But in regards to his kicking, he missed, 4 penalties? 4 penalties. 2 of them from right in front, FYI. And the other 2 from still easy. The one he actually kicked to win the game in extra time was the hardest one. Like, damn. What's going on here, mate? What's going on here? So England win 22-19, but France, they played a third-string team. You know, I wouldn't even class that as a second-string team. They had like 80 caps between the entire team, compared to England, who had like 800, 850 or something like that. That's a huge difference to be down by 7 points going into the final 2 minutes of the game, and then England score on the final minute of the game to tie it up and send it to extra time. Like, I'm sorry, but if you're English, like, yeah, look, obviously you're happy that you won, and you'll take that you won, you'll take it. But overall, I said last week that this week is going to be when we see what these two teams are made of. Both teams kind of got through, won all their games, but started through the groups. Obviously, France didn't get to play Fiji, but, they started through their groups. France just beat Scotland-ish, but they still won decently, and obviously they also beat Italy, and they started through that first half. England, on the other hand, they won 40-0 against Georgia, weren't looking too great. The second game, they beat Ireland, but they weren't great. And then the third game, I'll give them Wales. I thought they played pretty okay there. But you move into this game, and I think that we saw that they're a little bit of a pretending team right now. I think we need to see a lot more from them. I wanted to see who was going to be the pretender, and they were the ones who showed it. France, you bring in their full-strength team. And honestly, they're the two teams in the Northern Hemisphere right now who are the only threats. They're the only threats to the World Cup, and they're the only teams that are going to be going head-to-head in this Six Nations, sorry. Ireland might try and push, but besides that, France and England are going to be pushing for it for a couple of years. And I don't even think France are going to hit their peak for 2 years' time now. And I don't even think France have peaked yet. I don't think they peak until late 2022, early 2023, which is perfect. That's perfect. But then again, Wales and Ireland also peaked in the same year, just late of 2018, early 2019, when the World Cup was on, and then they were too early. So France need to hope they can drag it out a little bit, and hopefully they can prime right at that peak going into their own World Cup in 2023, because they are looking the goods. And I think England, they just need to do a bit of soul searching. That was a poor performance. They didn't do good at all. They were heavy favourites, and you'd be very disappointed. Yeah, look, they won, but there's more to this. There's more to this. And really, this isn't the one you wanted to win. You want to win the next one. You want to win the Six Nations. And I think that the French, they're coming. The French are coming. They're looking scary. And I think it's time to really start taking notice of them. I've been saying it for a while, but now it's time that you're going to see. It's official. The French are here, and they're ready to play some. But anyway, guys, that's going to do it for today's video. If you haven't hit that thumbs up button yet, go and smack that thumbs up button, and also go down there, hit that subscribe button. We are still streaming. We are still posting videos. We are still smashing it right now. Basketball season coming up soon too. World Rugby Review will still be going every single Tuesday, because we'll more than likely do a grading system next week for all the different teams, and then week after we'll figure something out, because I want to keep this a weekly thing. I don't want to stop it until the Six Nations comes or the South Africa Lions tour, you know what I mean? I really want to keep this review going every single week, and also if things do happen whilst we're waiting for the next games. But like I said, that will do us. I appreciate you guys as always. Let me know in the comment section what your thoughts are, whether you think I'm wrong, whether you think I'm an idiot, whether you think I'm right, or just your thoughts generally about rugby right now. But I appreciate you, and I'll see you guys next time. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Catch you later. See ya.